Today is day 2 of our 4-part seminar. Today we're going to go over COVID-19 and air pollution, starring Trisha, me, and Harsimar. So overview, we already did the Kahoot. I'm going to introduce with the phrase "we are the virus" and how it's like pretty problematic. Also, I'm going to talk about the psychology of climate action. Then Trisha's going to go into fracking. We're going to talk about bailing out companies. I'm going to touch on carbon tax, and then we'll have a discussion to reflect on everything. Oh yeah, okay. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so we're the virus. You've probably heard of this phrase popping up over social media, especially a few months ago into quarantine, like April, May. Tweets like this one here saying, "The water flowing through the canals of Venice is clear. Nature is returning after human activity has stopped. In conclusion, we are the virus." And this conclusion might be tempting to give into, especially seeing how much humans have disrupted Earth's ecosystems with fracking, plastic pollution, and as we will discuss in this seminar, air pollution. However, you mustn't for several reasons. Here are the several reasons why the phrase "we are the virus" is harmful. First of all, it's misleading. A lot of these tweets are based off of false or misrepresentative information, just like, making claims from a couple photos. Secondly, it's unproductive. It detracts attention from climate action while climate change itself persists, believing in the idea that everything's going back to normal after this global shelter-in-place quarantine. And third of all, it's pretty dangerous as it echoes a dark ideology called eco-fascism. So first of all, it's misleading. Like in this one here, it went pretty viral. It's saying that the canals of Venice are clear, presumably due to a decrease in water pollution, but they were actually only clear due to sediment settling at the bottom after a reduction of boats entering the canal and disrupting the water. And a lot of these "we are the virus" statements and posts are based off of wrong or vague blanket statements, and you shouldn't really trust them or do your own research if you see anything like this. Try to fact check it. Secondly, as I mentioned, it's pretty unproductive. Like this one, I'm going to read it out. "The sky is so magical these days as we are trapped in our homes and there's a discernible drop in air pollution. It feels so good to breathe the less toxic air, and my eyes don't burn whenever it goes out. It feels like we're the virus. Hashtag Earth is healing." It's unproductive. The drop in emissions right now is very temporary and seen with any economic recession like the one we're seeing right now. Taking the drop in emissions as a sign of climate progression detracts attention from the oil and plastic producing companies still contributing to climate change in the background of all of this. It's not a sign to relax. If anything, it's the opposite. As you can see here in the next slide, we should be driving more attention to climate action as a result of the pandemic. This is because many of the factors that are associated with zoonosis, which is a disease that can be transmitted from animal to human, like COVID-19, are the same factors that climate activists go against, namely deforestation, intensified agriculture and livestock production, and climate change itself. I thought it was pretty interesting how these relate to climate change. Zoonosis, next slide. Global warming. If you're doing AP Bio summer homework right now, you know that because of the increase in global temperatures, certain viruses and pathogens that used to be restricted to certain areas of the world that were hot can now move across the globe into now warming areas and biomes. For intensified agriculture and livestock, a lot of livestock, especially for the meat industry, those animals are kept in really tight and unhygienic corridors, and they're really just like a breeding ground for different pathogens and viruses, especially with the massive doses of antibiotics that they give these animals a lot of the time. And with deforestation and how it relates to an increase in zoonosis is more complicated, but in general, you don't want to mess with ecosystems because the stuff inside of them will leak out like pathogens. Yeah. Back to We're the Virus, it's pretty dangerous. The solution of eradicating the human virus, the human race with the coronavirus falls in line with recognizably extreme views. Next slide. Why is it dangerous? Because it echoes ecofascism, which is roughly defined as a fringe political model in which an authoritarian government would require individuals to sacrifice their own interests to the organic whole of the nature. Many eco-fascists believe in the dangerous idea that if we get rid of enough people, then the human race will be more sustainable. The phrase "we're the virus" shadows this dark ideology. And although most people tweeting the phrase aren't aware of the problematic side of it and are just like going along with this trend, that problematic side of it is still there, and the phrase should be rejected. I'm not gonna go too deep into ecofascism because it gets pretty dark. But if you want to read more about it, then I'll post some links to good articles. So, in conclusion, what to do about this climate sentiment during COVID-19? First of all, recognize the false claims about the earth healing, which are oftentimes spread around social media. Do your own research, fact check whatever you see. It's really easy to just accept whatever's on your Instagram feed. Number two, stay vigilant and remember that decreased emissions are a temporary symptom of economic recession, and climate action is still needed. And number three, reject the problematic phrase, "we're the virus," because of the reasons listed before. But if you're at this seminar or watching the recorded version, you most likely accept and treat climate change as at least a concerning threat. But why don't we care more? I'm going to go into that right now. For something that poses such a huge threat to human and ecological health, and is urgently recommended by many specialists to have a swift, immediate action dedicated to, why don't we care more? Why don't we see as much of a passionate and unanimous reaction to climate change as we do to other issues such as crime, inequality, and so on? Well, for several reasons, but mainly because of how we judge risk. According to Daniel Kahneman, great psychologist, award-winning, our brains have two systems for decision making, system 1 and 2. System 1 is fast and it relies on instinct or emotion. It's primarily unconscious, and it's what some might refer to as your gut feeling. In contrast, system 2 is slow and relies on rational thought. It's what we use to consciously decide if something is a risk or not. As Daniel Gardner explains in his article, "Why Don't We Care More About Climate Change?" Really good one. Sometimes these two systems agree, but in other times, as in the case of climate change, they don't. Gardner explains that as we use system 2, the logical one, to figure out that if we drive our car to school or work, it emits carbon dioxide, and multiply our car's emission by, quote, 1 billion cars and thousands more greenhouse gas sources, 7 billion people, and 150 years of industrialization, we know we're in big trouble. We know that. We all know. However, System 1 finds that when we drive our car on a daily commute, there's no perceived danger. Nothing bad happens. We drive, our neighbors drive, but there's no real danger appears ever. In situations like this, where System 1 and System 2 are contradicting each other, where one says something is safe and the other says something is dangerous, it has been observed time and time again that System 1, our gut feeling, always trumps System 2. As a result, most of us aren't that concerned about driving and air pollution, much less about air pollution and climate change as a whole. Next slide. In general, the threats that we do react to are personal, abrupt, and immoral. But climate change doesn't really fit this portfolio. it's not brought on by a single person or company. It's all of us. It's slow moving compared to immediate threats that we're used to, taking the span of months, years, and decades. And it doesn't ignite a feeling of immortality for most people, at least. In addition, climate change is a global trend, meaning that the climate itself is the probability of pattern of weather, not a single event. So oftentimes it's hard for humans to grasp the idea of climate, much less the idea and thus threat of climate change. So even though it is considered by many scientists to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest threat to human health, our System 1 Brave doesn't perceive it as that big of a threat, and we don't react as much as we should. In addition, we have a finite pool of worry, meaning we can only dedicate so much worry to one thing. So the threats that we consider that are dangerous, like as mentioned, crime, inequality, and especially now with COVID-19, we prioritize those way over climate change, even when climate change is still there and has a big threat. So it's important to remember, even with this pandemic, that, it's really important to be aware of COVID-19 and to take the proper measures to protect yourself from it. Climate change is still there and it's still a dangerous threat. This is a quote from the article I read, super good article. Done well, the remote threat of climate change becomes as concrete, as detailed, vivid, visceral, as a lion crouching at the end of the long grass, her muscles tense, her stare relentless. And I think that's what a lot of climate change communicators and scientists and us, Green Earth as a club, are trying to do. We're trying to make people, trump that System 1 versus System 2 ordeal and, make them feel that climate change is a real threat, because it is. Oh, should we go into questions?
Yeah, let's have a question time.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Maybe about it's okay, Helena.
I'm scared of clicking it and it's gonna go to the next slide, so I'm just gonna keep it on here.
Just hit the back arrow.
No, yeah, on your computer.
It doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why. Yeah, I had to keep clicking it, but I clicked it on the other. Anyway, go into questions. I have a question, Polly.
Okay. Yes.
How do you think we should approach the idea of climate change? Not to people who are climate deniers, but just normal people who don't really care about it.
I read that we have I already kind of told you about this, but we have a concept map in our brain of everything we already know, and I think we have to approach that concept map and make people add the information that we're trying to communicate to that concept map by tying it back to their real life situations. So using real examples, real photos, using a lot of photos without desensitizing them. I think with that, it'll be in their heads. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question. So, because you're talking about all these climate deniers and stuff, and you're saying that you're talking about psychology, and you're saying that the reason that most of us don't care more is because we don't see the threat of climate change as imminent. So how would you propose that we make the threat seem more imminent to people?
I think one way to do it is to have more presence on social media. Especially now, a lot of people are posts about activism, and I think if we make it really important and viral on social media, then people will realize, because it does climate change. Oftentimes, it doesn't get headlines on news or anything, right? But if we can control social media, since we're all a part of it, I think that'd be a good way to reach out. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Anybody else? Oh my God, Liz is here. Okay.
Hi.
Should we go on?
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Trisha's topic, and then if they have any more questions, we can do like a final summary at the end.
Okay, cool.
You can start now, Trisha. Sorry about the slides.
All right, that's fine. Well, since we're on here already, let's just define what fracking is.